I'm Prisha Agarwal, and my guest for today is someone who has broken the traditional boundaries of a tech career time and time again. She's constantly looking to grow her knowledge, staying prevalent, and adapting with time. She's currently Vice President of Global Business Process at one of the biggest names in the music industry, Warner Music Group. A true trailblazer. Welcome, Deepa Abi. Thank you so much for joining me on here and telling me a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Prisha. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so to get started, just let me know what all does your job entail? I mean, a vice president, what are the responsibilities that you have?
So, what I manage is what we call process transformation and digital transformation. So, everything we do in our life has a process. You wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you go have breakfast, go to your school bus station, and then get a bus. That's a process. Every business runs on processes such as these. Um, so my job is to look at what are these processes within the businesses and how can we make them better for our people so that we all love coming to work and we love doing stuff for our artists and the music and the work that we promote around creativity. And then the digital transformation aspect of it comes in to say, how can I do this faster and better without actually having to have my people look at documents or Excel files and lose their spirit in such tools? So I have one of the best jobs in the world. I get to do both of these. I get to speak with a lot of people. And as you mentioned, I've gotten to work in a lot of industries with this as a base. So fundamentally understanding a process of a business and understanding what digital capabilities you can enable within that business can really, really help our people and the business in turn to make more money.
That sounds amazing. So now I have to ask, what's the most exciting part of your job?
I have to say the exciting part of my job is thinking up new ideas.
Okay.
There are a lot of times that we think, oh, this problem is tough, it is not solvable. But sometimes you have a very simple idea staring right in your face. Um, and it and a lot of times it is not just me sitting in a corner in a cubby hole somewhere trying to think of these ideas. That is when the networking comes in. That's when meeting with teams happens to sometimes just trigger an idea which you wouldn't have thought about. Um, Sometimes it is in mundane activities like cooking, or you're just taking a walk and something strikes you and you're like, yeah, maybe I should try that. So that's the fun part of my job, for sure.
I love that. So you find inspiration in a lot of different places.
Absolutely.
Okay. So now that we've gotten a little overview from you on what you do, let's move on to your career and how you shaped it. So I did give a very, very general overview in the introduction, but you did start off as, I think, a manager, right, in GE. And then from there, you went to Genpact. And then you had 2 years in Accenture and you were a director. And then you were back to Genpact as a VP, and then later on you went to Warner Music Group. Am I right? Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
I mean, this is an amazing journey, but talk me through your mindset during this and how you were actually shaping your career.
So I'll take you way back to 2000, um, which is when I got my first job with GE Medical Systems, and it was a job in a call center. However, GE had this policy that if you want to progress in your career, you have to be green belt or black belt certified. And what that basically means is nothing to do with kung fu or karate. It's a methodology for improving quality. And that I attribute the bug of Lean and Six Sigma to actually have shaped the trajectory of my career. I am a student of physics, math, and electronics. So a lot of this was fun. When we did work at G Medical Systems, it was like, oh, I get this. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about an electrode. You're talking about capacitors. You're talking about not being able to connect to these systems. I get it. And I'm able to help you talk through some of those issues. And then when I started engaging with Lean and Six Sigma, it is a lot to do with statistics, but it is also to do with people and behavior. So I think that really encouraged me to move forward in this direction where I was like, oh, I get to meet people, I get to solve problems, I can apply the math skills that I've been learning, and I can actually glean insights which were not traditionally available. Like you could do statistical modeling and be able to see that you have a seasonality in a process, and that is kind of causing trouble for you for your capacity and things like that. So that really, I think, was a big pivotal moment in my career for me to say, this is interesting. Where else can I apply it? So if you see every place I've worked beyond that, it has always been with the same spirit to say, where can I bring in the Lean Six Sigma, change management, design thinking kind of skills? And how do I keep growing those skill sets so that I can do more of the fun stuff that I want to do?
Mhm. But now that you brought that up, you have transitioned across industries, not only just jobs, right? So especially like you said, okay, you're a science student and math student. So yeah, you can apply that. But now you're in the music industry. So how were you able to make that connection and transition to the music industry? And just what was your mindset during that?
So I'll go back to the fundamental being process, right? If you look at every business, they create something, they market it. So obviously the sales happen, and then you're making sure that that particular whatever sales you've promoted, you're now making sure it is delivered to the customer or the consumer, and then you're looking at how does that money come back into the book of business. If you are able to, and I think this is where lean was like very helpful to me, is to be able to say, how do I take away all of the nuances, right? The way Prisha would do something, the way Prisha would work the process to get to school would be very different from the way Deepa would work the process to get to school. But if I take away the nuance that Prisha is doing it or Deepa is doing it, fundamentally, we may be doing the same set of activities. So and that is what's been, I think the biggest advantage is for me to be able to say, okay, everything else around the business to me is just the additional nuance. It's the additional layer, additional feature. Fundamentally, what are we trying to do? And that sometimes helps you, that most of the time, I would say, helps you understand the business. And then your transition doesn't become very difficult. But then you have to be very open to also learning new things, right? Like I never knew that 10 tracks is an album. I always knew I would get an album. That's great. But I never knew what that really meant. I did not appreciate the amount of work that goes into making sure that the music reaches us through Apple Music or Spotify. And if it is an explicit music, it is coded as explicit. That takes a lot of work in the back end. But those are nuances that you have to be open to learning, right? And be able to just have a very open mind, and also be able to state when you don't know something that you don't know something. Um, there are a lot of times I will actually ask my colleagues, I don't understand that. Can you explain that to me? Or they will give me an acronym, and I will without hesitation ask, what does that mean? Because that's the first time I'm hearing it. Would you mind explaining it to me? And I think the music industry is one of those industries where I've really seen it be such passionate people, but also very friendly people. So they want you to be able to understand what they do. So, and if you are there to help them, they really want you to learn so that they can benefit from what you can offer to them as well. So I would say that's why the transition between different industries hasn't been very difficult. The way I explain this to my teams is we are the concept creators. The content is already there. We just need to be able to say, how do I build this concept so that I can leverage the content and make it even bigger, even more powerful?
I love that. Okay. So would you say then that your transition has been seamless in sorts because of the friendly people in the music industry, or what did you still have to? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have to give a shout out to my boss who spent a few days during my initial days in Warner Music, who spent a tremendous amount of time explaining to me how it works, what certain terms mean, who the players are. And I think equipped with that knowledge, getting into the work that you need to do, you're just better prepared.
But you still, I guess you probably had to make that decision where, like, okay, I'm switching industries. So was that kind of a little daunting to you? Were you worried about that at the beginning? Or was it like, no, I'm ready for this change?
I did do quite a bit of research. Um, I do like a good challenge. And that's why I haven't always gone back and worked in the same industry twice. But I still do have my favorites. I will not name any, but I still do have my favorite industries. Um, but that also kind of coincides with your growth, right? Your growth happens when you challenge yourself to do something that you've never done before. If I continue to do the same thing over and over, with absolutely no change, then my fear is that you get too comfortable and then you're not learning and you're not progressing.
Mhm.
So challenging yourself, and it is uncomfortable. It is sometimes you wonder, like, what am I trying to do? But the learning is what I think really motivates me to say it's okay. We'll figure this out.
I feel like more people should follow that. Like we should challenge ourselves more. Well, okay, so now we've talked about that. I am personally, as you know, very intrigued by the music industry. So I mean, who better to ask than you, who's like working in it? Can you give us some insider view on how the music industry works and what role Warner Music Group has play in all of this?
Sure. So, I mean, the way the music industry works is there are ways in which you get the music. Either you have your own artists who record, or you license songs, or you acquire catalogs. Once that happens, if you have your artist, then you have to also make sure that they are putting out music on a timely manner so that you're able to take that and market it forward. A big role for Warner Music is the identification of those artists. Because if you look at the three biggest players, Universal, Sony, and Warner Music, each of them have their own identity as far as the artists are concerned as well. So our pop artist will look very different from a Universal or a Sony Music pop artist, though it is the same genre, right? But it's just the 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 feel, and I would say the brand is very different. Um, the biggest aspect of any of these music companies is making sure that the artist's marketing happens, so that, obviously, if you have an artist, you want to make sure that they're getting the kind of reach that you as a global company is able to provide to them. And that's where I would say a lot of our effort is placed. Everything from how does it get into digital service providers, streaming providers like Apple, Spotify, and so on. And it also things like how do we position them on social media? How do we make sure that their concerts and tours are happening? And so on. So that's at a very, very high level how any music company works. Of course, there are nuances when it comes to genres, when it comes to specific artists, and so on, which is kind of confidential information that we don't want to discuss here. But if you look at the broad spectrum of the work that happens in the music industry, a lot of times that's what it is. And then obviously there's the rights and royalties and making sure that revenue comes in, which pretty much any business does. um, that's that's how the music industry works. And of course, we at Warner Music also have a publishing side of the business. So this side of the business is where we have songwriters, and we actually market that as a product, as to what songs are available to us and how do we actually get them out into the world so that it is heard by people and we can actually make an impact in a meaningful way.
And I mean, right now there's so many people who are creating music or, want to be somewhere in the industry. So you transitioned, but yours was more along the process line, like you were telling me. But what advice would you give to youngsters who are looking for similar opportunities or just want to be a part of um, the industry? Are there internship opportunities, or where should they even start?
Internships are always a good opportunity, right? One for there's a lot of glitz and glamour when you look from the outside in versus when you're really inside and you have to do the job. Some of these things can just seem like an ordeal for, let's say, a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old. So it's always good to have or to be able to leverage internship opportunities, because it helps you understand how that business works, how any business works, music, of course, but anything. How does that business work? And then you can think about, is this something that you see yourself doing in the future? So that you're not getting to a point where you've invested time and energy, and 6 years down the line, you're like, why did I make that decision? Right. So internships are always a good opportunity, with the caveat being, don't just come in to punch the keys, right? Like, truly spend the time to understand, how does this work? What happens within this business? Um, all of the questions that you just asked. How does the music industry work? How does the music industry acquire artists? How do they make money? How do they make sure that royalties are in place? Like, just asking those questions, being curious, being inquisitive, and understanding, that could be a good stepping stone for any industry, not just the music industry, but any industry.
Okay. Even for Warner, I mean, it's such a big name. Are there internship opportunities there, or is it like you have to
Oh,
start?
absolutely, absolutely. We do have internship programs. Um, I am not exactly sure how it works, but I do know that we do get approached by our HR teams to see if we would at any point want to have an intern associated with our line of work. Um, yeah, absolutely. I don't think that's as much as a constraint as industry is not as much as a constraint as just being able to figure out how do you channel into that internship program.
Okay, that's great. That's actually amazing. And then of course we have the internet where we can do all the research
Oh,
to find
absolutely.
it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will ask this question. This is a little away from the conversation that we were just having, but I always ask this because, especially your position, it is an executive position. And I feel like you do have to have that leadership quality, but everybody has a different style. So, what would you describe your style as, your leadership style?
Okay, let me see. I think I am going to go back to the Daniel Coleman model here and say that I would consider my leadership style to be a combination of visionary and democratic. The reason I say that is, I do like mobilizing towards a vision rather than just being that, oh, we have to do it. But why do you have to do it? I always think about what is in it for them, the people who are going to make that change or lead towards that vision. What's in it for them, um, right? Because I wouldn't want to do something that doesn't give me anything in return. So what is it that when, as I'm mobilizing towards that vision, what will they do? What will they get? And democratic, because I love listening to the other person's ideas, getting that buy-in, getting valuable inputs from people who've had experience in this space, or it could be a completely different space. Or it could be an absolute newcomer who could say, hey, have you thought about doing it this way? And it could actually work. I really like that. So that's where I think I would put myself, the visionary democratic.
I like that you had like specific words to describe each one. Um, well, I think the last question I would ask you is somewhat similar to one I've asked before, but this is very specific to leaders, like you were talking about. What advice would you have for the next generation of leaders?
Let me think about this. Next generation of leaders. I would say, I think three things, right? One is listen to understand. I feel as human beings, we just have this innate need to respond. So as Prisha is talking, I'm already building this response in my head saying, yeah, I know the answer to that. Like, yeah, I know exactly how to solve it. Um, but I have often felt that that diminishes the value of the understanding you have of what are you listening to. So listen to understand. Our world is only getting more and more complex. So it is important that we stop and listen. The second thing I would say is don't let perfection be the enemy of good, because as leaders, I don't think we always have the luxury to say, I will action on this when you come to me with an absolutely perfect solution. Or just being able like just being able to know that 80% is good enough and let me action on that, and then I will build towards the 20%. And how do you use technology to enable you to do that, right? Because that to me is a big part of what our future is going to be. It is going to be the human and machine working in collaboration. So how you cannot wait for perfection in that stage. And the third thing I would say is make data driven agile decisions. And what I mean by that is, again, you will not have all of the data to say, I have crossed every T's, dotted every I's. I know there is 100% chance that there is no risk to the decision I'm making, and then I will make a decision. Because again, technology and where we are headed in the future, we are only getting more complex and we're getting more and more fast paced. So if you learn how to be able to understand data, make those iterative decisions in a timely manner, I believe you will have leaps and bounds of an advantage over a lot of the other people who may be in the same race as you.
That's wonderful advice. And I
You're
think that's all.